Hello and welcome to Transforming Worlds. In this episode, we speak to Jenny Grettve. Jenny is the head of transformation at the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, Culture and Creativity. She's a dynamic global systems thinker and strategist whose work bridges disciplines to address the most pressing challenges of our time. She has a deep understanding of architecture, design and social systems and approaches problems through an integrated, holistic lens, seeking solutions that transcend traditional boundaries. Jenny's work is fueled by the conviction that the world's most intractable issues, from climate change to economic inequality, require bold, interconnected approaches that challenge existing structures. She believes in the idea that sustainable, transformative change must come from embracing experimentation and even failure, recognizing that disruption and risk are essential parts of powerful innovation. Join us in this conversation, which we had right before the Christmas break and before she was starting her new job as the head of transformation at the European Institute for Innovation, Technology, Culture and Creativity. She talks about her recent book, Mothering Economy. She talks about her view as a non-economist as to how we need to change the system we're all a part of. Tune in to an in-depth conversation of these issues and a discovery of what the next question might be. So welcome, Jenny, to Transforming Worlds. How are you and what is transforming in your life right now?
I'm good. I'm, end of the year, end of yet another cycle. So I think I'm in that mood of like trying to slow down, trying to close things, trying to be ready for my digital detox that will, try to have for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that work for you? Like, do you actually put everything off and not look at your messages?
To be completely honest, I close everything, and then after 2, 3 days, I'm like, no, maybe I need to open this up again because I do love working. So during
Yeah.
my holidays, I manage a few days, but then I'm back.
Yes, like most of us, but back in the day, I used to work in market research, and when we did research to this holiday season, etc., people look for many ways to escape.
Yeah.
To escape the environment of being around family, which can sometimes be very triggering. So sometimes people need the devices
Yeah.
to lift their head above water. And it's important that we be compassionate with that behavior. I have it too, not so much from escaping from my family. I'm actually looking forward to the coming season, but particularly, feeling that you might be missing out on things.
Yeah.
Like it's our connection with the world.
No, absolutely. But I also have like this, I'm divorced and a single mother, and this year I don't have my kids over
Oh,
Christmas, so I have a week for myself,
mm,
which I'm also really looking forward to. It's a different kind of holiday and vibe when you're alone and not with your family.
yeah. Very restorative as well.
Yes, I mean it's not in a negative way at all. I'm going to hibernate, I think, just
Oh,
uh,
wonderful. Yeah,
restore.
good, good. Taking time for ourselves and self-care is the first step in caring for others. So amazing
Absolutely.
and
Yeah,
wonderful you have time to do that. So
exactly.
tell us a bit about your work, because for me, you are like the extraordinary example of transformation. If I could find one example of someone who really lives and breathes transformation, it would be you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're originally an architect, and then you've moved
Yes.
into these incredible social domains. You do
Mm.
fabulous and very inspiring work. How did you get there?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, how do everyone get where they are in life? I think it's you're building stones and you're exploring. But I think um I'm maybe extraordinarily curious about life and about humans and about how everything is connected. So I have a lot of energy. And I did, yes, you said, I have a master in architecture. I've never done a house in my life. I never worked in an architecture office. So kind of straight away, I jumped into different fields and I've been working in fashion and design and then in urban planning and temporary structures in cities. And then slowly I kind of accidentally fell into systems and systems thinking and how are everything connected. I think it came from the work in cities. If you look at urban spaces, there's so many more, notions going on than just the architecture. It's psychology. How do we behave in places together? And it's philosophy. Like why do they look like they do? And if you look at history and who came up with the idea that a street needs to look like a street. And it's sustainability. It's the current time we live in. What does that mean to be alive today? What does it mean to be a human? And then one of my favorite topics, economy, like how is then also economy related to all of these things? So I think I've been very fluid in my way of working and what I would like to explore. And then I've been I've had a big chunk of luck to be able to also do these things because it's not easy to survive. We also have to pay a rent. So
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
And would you say that what drives you is more positive, as in the curiosity, or more negative, to use a word, as in the discomfort?
Well, it's I think that's actually one of the things that I'm proud of myself, that I can be quite melancholic. I've had periods in my life where I've been truly depressed as well. Like I'm close to maybe not negative sides of life, but darker sides, absolutely. But somehow, even though I've been down there, I see some light. So I think there's a tension between, light and dark, or negative and positive. So I'm holding on to hopeful views maybe of living in
Yeah. Yeah.
general.
Yeah, it's the nature of our world. These
Yeah,
contrasts, this
yeah,
duality is actually, we need both. And of course, for more creative people, more sensitive people, we both of them are sharper. So we tend to be, looked upon by others as we only see the sharper, bright side, but we also see the contrast and we see the sharpness and the edginess of the dark side. But hopefully, not necessarily to be lost in it, but just to become aware of it and become aware of that contrast, which is, I think, absolutely wonderful in your work. I mean, you're very prolific. You make socks
yeah,
and write books and give
yeah.
talks, and
Mm.
this has to come from a well, and that well is also the depths, of course,
Yeah, yeah,
because you show a mirror to us of many things that these days, and with systemic collapse, with the meta crisis, are very relevant.
mm.
So I think, sharing this is very valuable, because very often transformation comes from discomfort. Otherwise, it's all beautiful and unicorny and pink fairy dust. But it doesn't actually last. For things to be meaningful, to be lasting, to gain traction, they need to address the fundament. So
Yeah.
you talk a lot about the meta crisis. What is the meta crisis?
Well, the meta crisis is all of our, global problems connected and looked upon as one, but also including, I mean, this is my view of this. I know you can have a few different views if you Google the meta crisis, but it's also all the spiritual disconnection that we have, philosophical kind of broken world. So I mean, I see it as a much larger, holistic current problem that we live with.
And what's the problem then?
I mean, this is the core of my work.
Yes,
That's the question I work with. Like, what is the problem?
yes.
Because you could easily just go, well, we have an energy crisis, we have wars, we have inequalities, we have, biologies falling apart. Those are problems, but there is also some larger problem that that I'm focusing on, which is what is the problem about being alive? Like why are humans sometimes so stupid? What is that? What is it that we're doing? I mean, well, and then is that can we solve it? I mean, is that a problem that is solvable? And I think it's very much connected to existentialism. Like why do we live? I mean, it's a huge topic, but I do think it's enormously relevant today. Like when we now sit with knowledge, when we know so many, I mean, the science, internet, AI, I mean, we know so many things about history and futures and current times. Still, we know so little.
Yes, and perhaps that's the thing we have to embrace the most, the not
Yes.
knowing. And in
Yeah.
doing so, embracing one another. Because you
Yeah.
talk about this in the mothering economy. So
Yeah.
tell us about this. What is the mothering economy?
Yeah, but it's something that I've been carrying with me for many, many years.
Yes.
And then now it's a book released earlier this year, and that I've been working with for like actively for a couple of years. But it's about looking at economy maybe from the perspective of a non-economist, even because I'm not an economist. But I do think economy is so much more than what people tend to think. It's not only money and transactions, it's relationships. It's about how we're using shared resources. It's about how we survive. It's about how we can be, caring about each other, but about everything we need to survive, and how are we relating to Earth. So I mean, it's a much larger system, and the mothering economy specifically is. Well, I was interested in how, as a parent, you provide for your child without ever asking for anything back. So you're only sharing, you're giving, you're supporting, you're loving, and every single parent is fine with that. But then why do we not do the same thing for each other and Earth? So I was thinking, if we have that type of economy, what would the society look like if we all kind of care without demanding something back all the time?
And what were your answers?
Yeah, I think I have more thrown out the idea or like an invitation for further dialogues than sharing an answer. And I don't know, back to what we just also talked about, the existentialism. Like maybe we don't need a specific answer, and maybe that's also something that we humans are always like striving for. We want to know everything, and we need all the answers to kind of like close that book and then move on. But I think it's important to be able to just sit with very broad ideas and feel fine with not having an answer, but enjoying the dialogue.
Yeah. So I created a tool 10 years ago when I wrote a book that was called Change Ahead.
Yeah.
And in there, I talk about the quest for questions. So, how, in order to avoid entropy, so the unintended consequences of design, it's important to think about what question will you have once this design is completed? What question will arise because of the movement the motion that this is creating, the dynamics, relationally, of course, in the systems in which it's going to live. And I think that that goes to your point. Indeed, the more we embrace the unknown, the less answers we have and the more questions we have. And I think that your answer is really, dare to question, dare to question. So when we start as parents, those of us who are lucky enough to be parents, we have no idea. I certainly had no idea what I was doing, but the place where you look for okay, what might I do? How do I approach these? These are all questions. Is really the heart, and it's really connecting with what intention do I have as a parent and for my child, and through the child for the broader world. What have been the reactions to the mothering economy? Because I think it might make people uncomfortable as well.
Yeah, I don't know. No one has reached out saying they're uncomfortable.
Okay.
I was no, I've only actually received like warm thank yous for kind of putting it together maybe into like something tangible to carry with you. I have to say, I was surprised that it's been like so many men have also reached out
Mm.
saying they're super interested and they want to kind of dive deeper into this. I had a fear that both the topic but also the name of the book would mostly engage women, but it's almost 50-50, which I thought was beautiful to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we all have mothers. I mean, it's the only way to get into this realm. So,
No, no,
so
no, no.
that for sure rings a bell. And I think
Yeah.
I was asking about the discomfort because being children to our mothers is also very painful. And so being reminded of the importance of care is also being reminded of the care we didn't receive,
Mm,
we didn't have. And that happens even in the best of families, even in
mm,
the best of circumstances, we don't receive everything we need.
mm,
And so I think that what's important is also that there is a kind of empowering aspect of, feeding your inner mother and your motherly qualities, which are human qualities. They're not necessarily female. And really trying to think what happens when we start bringing this into our everyday, into our projects, into our society, indeed.
yeah.
But it is confronting. It has to be
Yeah.
necessary.
Yeah.
Recently, you and I had an interaction with a group of young people
Mm.
in Sweden, and we were talking about hope. And I asked them what brought them there and what questions they had, and one of them said to me, "I am forced."
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
might also be something that in older systems were things that were done out of love, but perhaps not very conducive to everything. My reply to him, by the way, for our listeners, was that I grew up in a military dictatorship and that sometimes being forced allows you to be fully independent and become a keen observer of what's really going on. And I hope that did help this young gentleman. Um,
Mm.
but there is this, we're in between time, so that there is this kind of moving from one space into the other. You spoke to men before your mothering economy book,
Mm.
with a book that is titled What a Way to Die. What was the reaction of men then?
That book, I would say, is way more, you know, stirring up emotions.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's called Oh, What a Way to Die, and
Yeah.
it's a dialogue. It's fiction, so it's a dialogue between two investment bankers talking about their work, their role in society, but also life in general. But the reason why I wrote that book is because I've been working. Within economic fields, municipality work for many years, sustainability, systems thinking, and I kept on bumping into men who were always telling me that I was naive, that I didn't fully understand how systems work, that I was not business minded enough. I mean, fitting into the structures that we have created, the capitalist structures.
Yes.
And then I wanted to explore who these men are, but in a different way. So I tried to put myself into their shoes. Like, why is this person thinking like he is? Like, where does he come from? What would be his narrative, his history? So I just gave myself complete freedom to imagine this story between these two men. And one of them is starting to kind of feel pain, stress, that something is a little bit wrong, while the other one is like heavily just hanging on to what he believes is right and true. It's a very brief little book, but I think that book it was super nice for me to explore. But I think men find that really really hard. That without being a man, I've put myself in their shoes, trying to kind of explore who they are.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Well, I
But
think,
again, I think I've had so many interesting dialogues after that blue book. Really, really interesting work.
What would be the most salient thing you learned?
I think um, I think it's something about manhood, like being a man today. It's really not easy, and I think for sometimes I think for women, even though I'm like a strong feminist, and women still are not having the same equal rights as men, like all over the world, and there's still work to be done.
Mm.
But I also think men now have to form, groups and do maybe not like the similar, exactly the same type of work, but there is work to be done with men in groups of like caring for each other and yeah, going against the system that we have. I'm not the one who will tell them what to do or how. I mean, now I'm talking about them, but it can
Yeah.
be. I mean, I'm very much of a idea of fluid genders, or who you belong to or refer to or want to be part of. But I think there's something about what it means to be a man that is to be explored.
Yeah, I mean, even regardless of gender, we're all part of a dogmatic and normative society, wherever you are in the world. There are rules to live by,
Mm,
and these may or may not be in accordance to our values. So the more we are drawn into our values as a way of sort of designing our own way in the world, and by design, I don't mean crafting an identity that is not your own, but actually aligning it to what would be the most preferred identity in line with your values. This process needs men and women, except of course women have been relegated, so we have more space, like this young guy who I said, being forced actually gives you
yeah.
freedom. When you
Mm,
can see the other side of that coin, then there is more. We have still to compensate for what we haven't done, but that's different from undoing.
mm,
I think men have a lot of undoing to
yes.
do, and moving more into the being
Yeah.
space. And
Yeah.
indeed, for that we need one another. Where do you get your inspiration, Jenny?
Good question. I mean, I live in a small town in Sweden, so there's not much happening where I live. So I would say I live my life a lot in digital worlds. So I do spend a lot of time, flying around on the internet, actually, gathering beautiful inspiration from so many different places. I also love books. I read loads, old books, fiction, nonfiction, everything. But then maybe mostly, what would you say, like the things that are not functioning well in life gives me a lot of inspiration. That can be, I mean, inequalities, for example. I mean, that's such a well of work and notions, ideas that you can transform and work with. So I think you know broken parts of society gives me inspiration.
Wow. Yes. And do you compare this to processes, for example, in nature or in technology, how this process of morphing, yeah, so transformation is really changing form.
Mm, mm,
This process of morphing and of transforming could be a source of inspiration about what to do with all those broken pieces.
I mean, I'm not the person who's out in nature every weekend. I'm also not super into technology, apart from like my computer and the internet. So, skeptical about a lot of digital innovations. But I think it's more about um, like the joy of living. I think I've had that since I was very, very young. I truly enjoy being alive. I think it's more of like, you know, what happens around the next corner? What is tomorrow going to be like? How can this person, my new neighbor, What stories does he sit on? How is this next book going to end? I mean, I think there's a curious kind of energy going on that I'm using a lot.
Yeah, participating with life, co-designing with life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm.
So in your, if I look at your website and at your work, you talk a lot about systems, interconnection, the web of life, the economy. All of these are things that are organic in a way and emerging and unfolding in a way. How can we integrate ourselves with that? Because we come from cultural narratives that have put us away from that and saying, okay, that's happening regardless, and you have no power to, you know, influence that in any way. Whereas you are suggesting that bringing our full selves into the mix, caring into the mix, we might actually be agents to help that unfolding in a different way, to kind of nudge it in a different way. So how might we go about that? What are things that you do in your everyday life or that you work in your projects that seem to be working and can be a source of inspiration?
I mean, my main reply would be to slow down, like that we need time. If you just slow down, take time to see what you have around you, a lot of things change, like your perspective and what you see actually in your everyday life. There's I think sometimes when we talk about, you know, systems change, that we tend to look at very large scales, like or the, you know, municipality level governance. I mean, we need to change these enormous structures. Whereas I think if you also just leave your home, and you stop and you talk to a neighbor for 10 minutes instead of just running to work or to the bus that you need to take, something happens, and that's also a systems change. So I think it's like in those everyday scales and how we behave as human beings, and that's completely independent of where you live, and if you're in the countryside or in a city, or if you're in Sweden or in China, it's that change can happen, and we can all do it straight away. You don't need any specific skill. You don't need to have more knowledge or you know anything about systems thinking. It's more about how we're behaving. So I think I'm very interested in that, and how we're all, you know, behaving with that idea or not doing it.
Mhm.
But I think the key is to slow down.
Yeah, which brings me to the question you were talking about mothering and parenting as an act of giving, but there is
Mm.
also an act of receiving.
Mm.
Yes, we give selflessly, but there is a very important feedback loop. Dare I say, a cybernetic loop, to use a Gregory Bateson point of view. There is communication continuously. We give, but at the same time, we are having the feedback of this thriving young person, and that is an act of receiving. How might we become more receptive? Because that is so contrary. So you say, you know, let's take me, for example, running out the door. I come across the neighbor, but I actually need to catch a bus. So I just wave hello and off I go on my bike to the bus stop. And just to be clear, because I'm in Holland and I take the bike everywhere, even to the bus stop. Um, and there might be a slowing down, a potentiality there that I'm missing, which I could be incorporating from being more receptive. But it's hard because, you know, on the other side of that of the bus is some appointment that I needed to be at, and they're expecting me there. So how do we reconcile the expectation and the being receptive to life around us?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's not that you can slow down all the time, for example. I mean, it's not. I'm very much of a grayscale. Nothing is black and white.
Yes.
But it's I mean, in general, I've tried to practice this a lot myself over the last 2 years, to not book in too many meetings each day. I mean, I always have Mondays blank. I'm trying to pick up my kids a little bit earlier so that we have more times in the afternoon. I'm not doing any huge activities during the week. I don't know. I'm really trying to do small steps. But it's a choice that we're making. I mean, you also booked in those meetings. You can actually for yourself go, no, I'm not going to have any meetings before 10 each morning because I will have 2 hours to get myself to work. And if that is, stopping to talk to someone or having a coffee in a cafe somewhere and see who you might meet that day, or just read a little bit, or prepare for that meet. I don't know. I mean, there's so many ways to do this.
Those are excellent examples. It's really sort of freeing ourselves from the productivity principles that we've been brought up
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
and that are ubiquitous, and really planning and being purposeful and intentional about creating that space. And that starts with generosity for ourselves.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But we also have to say that we're privileged, you and I, like where we
Yes.
live in this part of the world, which is also something I think we're not talking enough about.
Hmm.
Specifically, at least now, if I talk about Sweden, uh, we're so rich in so many ways. We're
Yes.
safe. All my kids are fine. I mean, we have this lifestyle. And then we rarely talk about what then comes with that. What are my responsibilities, global responsibilities, knowing that I have the possibility to slow down. I have the possibility to live a luxurious life in that sense. Then do I need to do something else to support others, to support, you know, it might even be future generations. I don't know, but I think this, yeah, the responsibility is something that we don't talk enough about.
Yeah, and that's very important. So obviously, going back to the black and the white and the duality of things, privilege in this day and age rests on violence.
Mm,
There's no other way to look at it.
mm,
Having developed the culture that we have, and I am Latin American, as you know, I've lived half my life in Argentina, half my life in the Netherlands. Coming from a former colony, this is something we're acutely aware of. I mean,
mm,
being culturized, being colonized, has some benefits for sure, but it also is oppressive and violent on many, many other things, because the word culture was actually coined in Europe at the time that, the Queen of Spain was sending Christopher Columbus to look for the riches elsewhere, and finally discovering Latin America in 1492. And the idea was, this is culture, everything else is wild, everything else is uncivilized, everything else is in one manner or other wrong. And I think that now we need to look at it from the different perspective and saying, hey, we've imposed an homogeneous way of being that doesn't necessarily work for everyone and that is
mm,
unsustainable on a planetary level. So indeed, as you say, we are in a place of relative comfort, relative
mm,
rest. It doesn't feel that way. I mean, we feel stressed, but comparatively, we have the oxygen mask on. And from this
mm,
space, we can be making a difference for others. And sometimes that feels very far away, but actually, it's in the small acts that you've just described. Can you plan more pause into your daily life so that there will be room for, this inquiry, this different way of looking? But it's hard because we've also been taught to think about this. Perhaps it's my Catholic upbringing. Probably it's my Catholic upbringing. Saying I'm wrong. When you used to go to church back in my childhood years, we would have to beat our chests for being guilty of not being nice enough to other people. Thank goodness that's behind us now. No one has to blame themselves, but we have the possibility to act.
mm,
When we look at things like climate injustice, for example, what can we do?
mm. But that's something I hear all the time from from my Swedish setting. Like, but
Yes.
what should I do? What can I do? And I mean, there's of course all these things like don't fly, become a vegan. I mean, all these like the classic list of what you can do. Just start there and tick all those boxes. But then again, it's I'm sometimes struggling with people who are, for example, then in Sweden, working with being a sustainability manager, for example, at a huge company, if you're then not also living your life in this way that we're just describing, it becomes very strange that you're part of this broken capitalist system. You're stressed, you're a little bit angry, and then you step into your office, you sit down at your desk, and then you're going to do this beautiful work. To me, those two worlds are clashing a little bit. And I think like to be able to do that beautiful work, you also need to live in that beautiful way. And then by kind of experiencing and like living as you're preaching, I think the work you will do then will also be different. But it's yeah, it's something about that idea of that small is not enough, or that doesn't really matter. I mean, I hear that among my family and friends as well. Like, does it really matter if I take the train instead of a flight to somewhere? No, of course it's not. It's not going to, but it's something about inspiring others, knowing yourself that at least you're trying to live according to some rules that you've set up for yourself, or you know
Yeah,
yeah.
it's the mindset really. So I think that that's the common denominator in your work is provoking, is trying to see if like if small things in our mindsets change, then actually we will come up with like we will start with the idea you gave us and pull at it and then add one and start weaving this mindset shift create co-creatively with one another. So experiencing the train instead of the flight means going more slowly and perhaps seeing the landscape and then being able to tell a story about what you saw. And then it's the gift that keeps on giving, right? Because someone hears the story and says, oh, it's been so long since I saw the landscape. Maybe I'll take the train next time. And this is not about just, fossil fuel versus trains, etc., because then we get into a discussion of parts per million and what is more effective. But it's much more about how can the stories we tell through the experiences that we immerse ourselves in inspire others to do things differently, and being very allowing of what that might be. How do you, like you say, sometimes others come with these reflections, but what are things you do when you have several projects in engaging others and building community around these ideas?
It's been very interesting. So I have um like a lot of the work I do, it does kind of resonate with women. And I don't know, it's my brain or the tone I have or the work I do. But there's recently there's I feel that there's a lot of women that are on the move towards something. And I mean, that's been happening for quite some time. But I would say that it's with a completely different energy. Women are angry. Women are also at the same time, I believe, or what I see, less fearful. Like they're really like rolling up their sleeves. I think women are like gathering. So there's something there going on that I'm super intrigued about. So that I feel it everywhere I am, like in my online groups online, or even in my everyday life, or when I go to conferences. That tends to happen, like dialogues. Organization of different kinds. I think that's really driving me at the moment. But I also want to say that I'm actually very dystopian. I think the world we see it's gonna get really, really bad within, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 years. Um, at the same time, and it even surprises myself, I just don't want to, I'm not like dark with that fact or with that feeling like this is really going down. At the same time, I'm still the curious me. Okay, what do we then do? How do we live through that? What's again, back to the responsibility or back to meaning, or because hopefully I will live for another 40 years within that very broken mess. So how do we do it? What will mean something? How do I mentally prepare myself? Or how do we do that together? Or, where do I want to live? I mean, I'm imagining, for example, a Sweden with very high walls that no one is going to be able to come inside, and it's going to be fine and quite safe here. But then other parts of the world are going to be a complete mess. Where do I want to be? Do I want to be inside? Or do I want to jump that wall and be outside on the other side? Or I don't know. There's a lot of interesting, heavy thoughts and dialogues, but I'm still leaning to be joyful within that somehow.
Yeah, there might be a parallel here with the Swedish winter, right? It's a time of year where you see the stars the brightest, and it's hard. I mean, winter in Northern Europe is pretty darn hard. But there's also this, this ability to see other things that you wouldn't be able to see, in the middle of the long summer days. And it has its own beauty, its own wonder, in certain ways. I understand what you're saying about sort of this dystopian view. Again, the view is the view and the facts are the facts. And then in comes the perspective. From which perspective are we looking at the same thing? So we can look at the dark winter and saying, oh gosh, it's cold. But we could also say it's the dark winter where you see the stars. And this is a time of dystopian landscapes because it's a liminal time and it's a time of emergence. And you painted a future of, in say 15 years, what happens after? What happens in 100 years? I think.
I'm more interested in like the feelings, maybe rather than seeing a picture of it. So a feeling of more, as we've talked about, like care, generosity, slowing down, a feeling of actually for everyone to be able to feel how I'm feeling and have been able to feel in my life, because I have been safe and because I was raised on a platform where everything was nice. That should be the state for everyone. So that's something I would like to see in 100 years. How can everyone sit and have this type of dialogue and say that they're curious about life and they see joy even though things are dark? That's a goal that could be really beautiful.
That's inspiring. Thank you, Jenny. So where can people find your work?
Yeah. Well, I have a few different online. You can either find my design studio, when.agency, which is where I do systems thinking work. But then I also do write and I explore systems thinking through art and art practices, and that's jennygrettve.com.
Yes. Okay. I will add those. And also that's also where you buy the socks.
Yes.
I will add both of those into our show notes. And I'd love to thank you for this wonderful and inspiring conversation, which leaves us with questions, and that's the inspiring bit. There is so much we can question and so much we can do about the way things are. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.